to be able to problem solve with trig, we need to know our ratios. There's 3 ratios that relate angles and sides of a right triangle. So to do that, we've got to know what our ratios are. I've got a little mnemonic phrase that helps me. Some old hippie caught another hippie tripping on acid. So again, this is called a mnemonic phrase. It's just something that helps you memorize the first letter of all these words. So actually what I do is when I see a problem that I'm going to use trig for, I say this in my head as I write down this. Some old hippie caught another hippie tripping on acid. So that's how I fill it out. Now what those stand for is the trig ratios. So S stands for sine, O stands for opposite, H stands for hypotenuse, C stands for cosine, A stands for adjacent, H hypotenuse, T stands for tangent, O again is opposite, and A is adjacent. Okay. The ratios, they've actually added that to the SOL formula sheet. It's on the back. Their format of how they show you is a little different, but the angle, x, sine of x degrees, okay, what goes with the ratios is an angle. So the way they're showing it here, this is the angle, theta right there, the angle. So what these sides, the O, H, and A, here's what it stands for. Here's your right angle. So opposite your right angle is your hypotenuse. We've been talking about that for a little while now. Opposite and adjacent. So those are going to refer to the 2 legs of a right triangle. Remember, these are the legs. So what those refer to is you always have to be talking about what angle. Ask yourself, what angle am I using? So for example here, cosine of x, the angle. So here they say cosine of theta. So in the picture they're showing you that this is the angle. So here's how you name the 2 legs. Go opposite, there's your opposite, and then one next to, remember adjacent means next to, that's adjacent. So what I've seen students do is they, whether they use some old hippie caught another hippie tripping on acid or whatever it is they use to memorize, they come here then, and then actually they don't have to memorize it, they can use their picture. So this is like if you forget those, you could go on your SOL formula sheet and say, okay, well, Y is actually the opposite, Z is actually the hypotenuse, X is actually the adjacent, Z is the hypotenuse, okay, Y opposite, X adjacent. So students that forget it and want to use the formula sheet to memorize it, basically they go and they label their sides and they fill these in to help. Okay, so the next thing I want to show you is how do we use trig? What are the steps? So there are kind of 3 different situations where you might have. The steps is going to be the same every time. What's different is maybe how you solve it. So step 1 every time is going to be to choose your angle so that you can name the sides. Okay, so you've got to decide what sides are we going to use. Once you decide on the sides, step 2 is going to be to choose your ratio. Step 3 is going to be to substitute into that equation. Step 4 is going to be to solve, and that's where it might vary depending on what you're finding, what you're given. And step 5 is to check your answer, like, does it make sense? Okay, is my answer reasonable for the picture that I have? Most of the time you're able to look at reasonableness on an answer. Degrees, not always. Okay, so let me do an example so you can see what I'm talking about. Alright, so I'm going to leave all that in view here. We're going to this time find a missing side. So, step 1, name sides. So to name the sides, again, super important, what angle are you using? Okay, so I'm going to come over here and I'm going to mark my angle just to make sure I'm really focused. What are the sides going to be called? Okay, so if that's the angle, this leg is opposite, this leg is adjacent. Your right angle opposite that, your hypotenuse, that's never, like, that's always the hypotenuse. That's never going to depend on the angle. Hypotenuse is hypotenuse. The legs is what depends on which angle. So some students will go and name all three. Personally, I think that makes step 2 harder. So I'm only going to name the other side that I'm going to use here. So I'm going to use the hypotenuse because I have it. I don't have this side, I don't need it. This is opposite the angle, but I'm not going to use it. What I'm going to use is the adjacent one because I need to find x. So I name the 2 sides I'm going to use. Now, step 2 is to choose the ratio. Well, here's how I choose my ratio. Every time I see a trig problem, I'm saying to myself, some old hippie caught another hippie tripping on acid. Again, you don't have to use that. You can think of your own mnemonic phrase, or you can use your formula sheet, however you're going to do this. Okay, so here's how I choose. I look at what 2 sides I'm using, A and H. I come over here. Which one is using A and H? This one. That's step 2. Okay, step 3 is to substitute into that equation so that we can solve. Okay, so cosine, here's the actual equation, because when I write that, I don't really have it in the equation format. So here, or if you're looking at your formula sheet, so it's cosine of an angle equals. So cosine of an angle, we're using 68, is equal to cosine adjacent over hypotenuse. So adjacent is x, hypotenuse 24. Okay, so that's step 3, substitute. Step 4, solve. So here's where it's going to vary a little bit. When x is in your fraction, I use a proportion. Okay, so if I'm finding missing sides, I'm always using a proportion. So I put this over 1 so I can cross multiply. 1 times x, and cosine 68 times 24. Now, I actually forgot to mention something really important. When I go to use my calculator for these, okay, the default setting on your calculator is going to be radians, but we don't have radians in triangles, so you're going to go to mode. So again, if you haven't changed this, your default is they're all going to be on the left. So we're going to go down to radians and go over to degrees. Okay, and hit enter. All right, we don't use radians in triangles, we use degrees. The angles are in degrees. Okay, so I can hit second quit, or I think clear gets me out too. Alright, so now I'm going to go to my calculator to finish up here. So this is not 68 times 24. This is cosine 68 times 24. Cosine 68 is actually a number. Some students like to go right away and like find out what that number is. Personally, I just find it easier to do this all in one step. I'm just going to multiply these. Now, if you put 24 first, you're not going to have an issue, but a common mistake is students do this. Cosine 68, and they hit times 24, and your calculator is going to multiply those numbers first. So here's what you have to do. Close your parentheses. Super important. If you don't do that, it's not, the order of operations will not be followed. Well, the calculator will follow them, but you're not following them if you don't close that parentheses. Okay, enter. Alright, so my directions are saying nearest tenth. So remember how to estimate. That's where my nearest tenth is my first decimal, but I need to look to the next one. 9 says go up. It actually puts 9 up to a 10, so this actually becomes 9. Okay, the nearest tenth, this is going to be about 9.0. Okay, so step 5, check. Does this seem reasonable for my picture? Well, here's what I mean by that. There's some things you know about angle and side relationships in a right triangle. Your hypotenuse is opposite 90, so that's going to always be your larger side. So I know that x should be smaller. So I look at this, and it is smaller. It's quite a bit smaller, but let's see, that's going to be 22. So yeah, I mean, it should be, it's opposite a very small angle. So I like that answer. It seems reasonable. You know, it's common that people kind of skip over this last step, but I'm telling you, there's a lot of places where we could make silly little mistakes here. We could have named the sides wrong. We could have chosen the wrong ratio. We could have made a mistake in our solving. We could have not closed our parentheses. we could have forgot to set our mode on degrees. So taking that last step is going to catch a lot of those silly mistakes. Okay, so let's try another one. So the next example, let's see if I can still have for a little bit. I can have the steps up here. Okay, name side. So again, I'm missing a side, so this is going to be very similar. To name the sides, choose your angle. Make sure you're very focused. What's the angle I'm going to use? All right, once I decide, then I'm going to name the two sides. In this triangle, I'm not going to use the hypotenuse. There's nothing there to use. There's nothing, I don't have it, I don't need it. The two sides I'm going to use here are going to be the opposite leg and the one next to it, the adjacent leg. Okay, so step one, name my sides. Okay, step two, choose my ratio. All right, opposite and adjacent. Some old hippie caught another hippie tripping on acid. Okay, O and A, right there in tangent. So step three is going to be to substitute. So I'm going to plug into my equation. Remember, it's tangent of an angle. So tangent, the angle I'm using is 52, equals opposite over adjacent. Opposite was 9. Adjacent is my unknown, x. Okay, step three, solving. So x is in my fraction again. So I said that whenever I'm finding a side, when x is in my fraction, I'm going to use a proportion. But when x is in the denominator, here's where it's a little different, because when I cross multiply, I'm going to get tangent 52 times x equals 1 times 9. So x isn't alone yet. I haven't finished here on my solving. A lot of students are a little stuck here. How do I solve this? Well, remember, this is just a number times x. Pretend you had 3x equals 9. What are you doing? The opposite of multiplication, division, right? Okay, so that's what you're going to do here. Tangent 52 is just a number. So I'm going to divide both sides by tangent 52. Okay, it's going to knock that out of there. It's going to leave x equals, and then I go to my calculator, and I'm just going to enter this fraction. What does it equal? 9 divided by tangent 52. Now, because the parentheses here is the end, if I don't close the parentheses, it's not going to mess anything up, but it's just good habit. Go ahead and close your parentheses. Okay, so nearest tenth. So I go here, I say, okay, I'm going to finish here, but what's the next number? Oh, 3. Okay, that's small. So I'm going to leave it at 7.0. Okay, step 5, check. Let's go over here and see if that makes sense for our picture. I don't have the hypotenuse, so how to decide which one should be bigger? Let's see. Well, if that's 52, 90, 52, take those away from 180, and I've got 38. So remember that the larger angle is opposite the bigger side. The smaller angle, yeah, that's about 7. Yeah, that seems reasonable for my picture. So I like my answer. I'm going to stick with it. Okay, and then our last type of question is actually, what happens when x is in the angle? Okay, how do we find that? All right, all our steps are the same other than that. So this is the angle I'm going to use. So I'm going to now name my sides. Step 1, name my sides. This is the opposite leg. And then this is the hypotenuse. Okay, I'm not going to use that, so I'm not even going to bother naming it. All right, here we go. Some old hippie caught another hippie tripping on acid. If your choice is to use the formula sheet and you go and like set this up, you only have to do it once on your sheet, and then every time you can pull out your formula sheet and use that. Okay, so choose, step 2, choose my ratio. O and H, O and H, O and H, up, sign. Okay, step 3, substitute. So you can go to your formula sheet again if you forget what that's supposed to look like. It's sine of an angle. Well, this time x is my angle. Equals opposite over hypotenuse. So opposite is 11 over hypotenuse 17. All right, so how do I solve this? So this is going to be a little bit different. X is not in my fraction anymore. So this is actually the easiest one to solve because you're just going to go to your calculator. What you need to do to get x alone is to get rid of sine. Well, how do you do that? I mean, what is sine anyway, right? Ask your calculator. It's called the inverse of sine, the opposite of sine. So you don't really do it on that side. You're going to do it over here on your calculator. So you're going to come to your calculator. Now sine, the inverse of sine, all the inverse operations are on top. So the inverse of sine is in blue, so I'm going to hit second sine, okay? And then I'm just going to go ahead and undo that ratio. So 11 divided by 17. Again, it's at the end. It's not going to make a difference, but it's a good habit. Okay. Bam, 40 degrees. Yeah, nearest degree, just to verify degree